Hi, hello, good afternoon, and welcome everybody to the Plant 3D User Community Meetup for September. My name is Jason Drew. We also have Joel Harris on the line today, who will be
Hello.
joining us.
Hi, everybody.
So just to kind of give a quick background here on the GoToWebinar, ask that everyone keep your line muted for now, unless you need to ask a question down the road. That way we can reduce the background noise. If you do have a question as we go along through the session, you can type those into the questions box there or raise your hand. We'll see that on the platform here. And Joel will be watching for any questions that come up during the session. And that way it'll notify me. We can take a look at those. And just a reminder that these sessions are recorded. So we record these and then post to a YouTube playlist for each month so that you can go back and review these or share it to anybody that wasn't able to attend live. So I'll go ahead and let Joel give some background here on himself and bio.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Joel Harris. I'm Jason's colleague here at Autodesk. I'm also designated support specialist working with our EBA customers. I come from industry background, working as a plant piping designer in the oil and gas industry. Before that, I was an AutoCAD partner reseller and software developer. I've been with Autodesk for almost 7 years now. So, thanks.
All right, thank you. So just brief background on myself here. I'm also a designated support specialist and mainly working with enterprise customers on the following products here. Primarily Plant 3D, but also Navisworks, AutoCAD, Inventor, and some of the BIM 360 products. Prior to joining Autodesk, I had spent 10 years in IT support. Also worked at an oil and gas company in Tulsa doing some P&ID design for about 3 years, and then joined Autodesk and started getting into the plant software solutions that we have here. So I've been with Autodesk for about 8 years now. All right, so moving on to the agenda. So we're going to do an overview today of what these sessions are and then talk about some Plant 3D news. And then we're also going to talk about the main theme this month, which is pipe supports. And then we'll have follow-up questions from last month and then an open discussion Q&A. So we want to leave that time open for anything that anybody wants to bring up live here. So like I said, today we're talking about pipe supports. We'll do a quick overview of pipe supports in general, and then we'll get into some of the customization options around creating custom pipe supports, and then we have some tips, tricks, and best practices. So each one of these Plant Community sessions are meant to be casual engagement. So I have a small portion at the beginning around news and updates, and then we have some information around general discussion and products and workflows. So we try to teach something each month, a nice tip or trick, something new, and then towards the end in the Q&A section, we hopefully have a discussion that's driven by the users that are attending. So anything that you want to bring up topic wise, we can answer those live here. So just a safe harbor statement. I won't read through all of this. This is just our general disclaimer that we may be talking about or making statements around planned or future development efforts and products and services. So we just ask that you avoid making any business decisions based on those because plans are subject to change, dates and things of that nature. So just make sure that you check with your account team before making any purchase decisions based on something to make sure it's fully released and available in the product. So moving on to Plant 3D news, the first thing we want to mention here that there will be some changes here to the Plant Community meetups. So we're trying to align the Plant Community meetup with the other community meetups across the globe and with the other industries. So starting with the October session, we'll be just having one sign up for the Americas time zone, and we'll still record these and post these out to the YouTube playlist, but basically what happened is when they started the first plant meetup, we had 3 geos, but the other communities are just having one. So we're trying to align with those and simplify things a bit. So we'll have the sign up page changed. But for this month, we're recording all 3 geos, but then going forward, it'll just be for one session there. And then as far as some other news here around AU, so AU 2020, you may have heard that it's changed. It's going to be all online and all virtual. There's no cost to attend AU this year, but you still need to register to get into the system and participate. So that's going to open up around mid-September. And if you go to au.autodesk.com, you can go ahead and get set up and signed up. And then when the registration opens, you can go ahead and join that. And I believe at that time you'll be able to go through and pick the classes that you want to participate in. And then it will be a global digital event. So it begins November 17th with the Americas broadcasts and then continues around the globe. If you're like in Asia Pacific or Middle East, Africa, European time zones, you can join those starting on November 18th. So interesting change this year, and hopefully be able to sign up and join that since there's really no travel required. And then going on to the main topic here around pipe supports. So we'll just kind of do an overview of pipe supports for anybody that hasn't really worked with those yet on Plant3D projects. So there's quite a few shapes and styles available out of the box just with the supports catalog of Plant3D. And all of these are what's called parametric driven shapes. So basically, as you type in the dimensions, those will change and adjust in the 3D model to match what you've typed in there. So very flexible on positioning these and setting them up for your projects. And these are all the ones that are out of the box. This isn't the complete list, and there's obviously a whole list across here, but just be sure to check those out before we start looking at something like customized supports that we'll talk about here in a little bit. So there's several commands here that go along with pipe supports, and you have those up on the ribbon bar under the pipe supports panel there. So basically, if you want to add a support to a section of pipe, you can either click on the tool palette off to the right and just pick one of those shapes and then basically line it up on the pipe and position it where you want to go. You can also click up on the ribbon bar on the create button and do the same thing. That will pop up the list and you can scroll over and find the shape that you need and then place from there. Some of the other commands, the auxiliary commands that go with this are attaching supports. If you already have pipe support that's lined up with the pipe, you need to connect it there. There's a little paperclip icon here with this one that attaches the object to the pipe support. There's a convert support command, which this will let you take, for example, an AutoCAD block and convert that and connect it to the pipe and make it into an actual Plant3D pipe support. And we'll cover that here shortly. Detaching supports is just below that. And what that does is if you've already converted a support and you want to remove it from the pipe, you can do that. So it'll detach the AutoCAD object from the pipe support. If you wanted to disconnect it from the line, modify it, and then reattach it, you could do that. The toggle lock point of support mode, this is basically if you turn this on, then as you go through copying supports, like for example, a hanger, it will maintain the elevation that you set as you go and copy this down the line. So just kind of a nice feature to keep from having to go and readjust each one of those if you've got that on. And then something that was added in Plant 2016 and newer is this attached supports. Basically, it's sort of like supports on supports, where if you have a dummy leg with a stanchion there, you can connect those together. So the Plant3D sees those as one support, but when you run ISO, you'll still get the two different supports out there on the bill of material and get those reported out. So the note down here about the variants, that's just explaining that all of these pipe support scripts that drive those shapes are available in that zip file if you get into something like Python scripting and creating your own custom pipe support shapes. And then down here, this is just kind of pointing to the main pipe support spec tool palette. And we'll talk about that as well. Plant3D uses just that one spec sheet to drive that palette in the project, and that defines all of the supports that you have there available for your project. So we'll kind of go over here and get into custom pipe support. So, what if the out-of-the-box shapes, something is not available in there, but you need to create something? There are several options for that. We can, for example, you could convert a 3D AutoCAD block from a vendor shape, or wherever you find one, you can model it up yourself in Inventor, and then use that in your model. And the other option is a little bit more involved, requires knowledge of Python scripting, but you can create a custom Python script for the shape that you need, add grips and things like that, and then you can import those into a catalog and use them in your project. So those are highly customizable there to make a parametric shape. So if you're going to look at using, converting 3D geometry or blocks, basically, like I said before, that could be from any kind of shape that you use, vendor provided or custom, custom created. You can either use the 3D solid that you have in the model that you've maybe pasted in or already created from a block library. And pretty much the process here is that you would scale that support to match the outer diameter of the pipe, position along the pipe, and then you would use the plant pipe support convert command, as we mentioned before, from the ribbon bar or on the command line, and then you would go ahead and assign an S key if needed to change that. So very simple process, and it's kind of what it looks like here. Is going through this. You're basically selecting the object or the the geometry, and then you're going to snap that and attach it to the line. And at that point, it's a Plant 3D support. You can click on it, reposition on the line, things like that. So very simple to convert these over, and really just needs to be an AutoCAD block. And we did want to show here just very quickly how this works, because there are some tricks to it that we found as we were going through this and testing. Now this is the same example there in the image, and this is just a 3D block that's been converted. And what I want to do is get this first position on the pipe where it needs to go. So you could use a nearest snap here and get it generally or roughly where you need it to be, and then maybe move to a top view here and align this where you want it to be on the pipe. And then at that point, you'd go ahead and convert this and make it into the actual shape that you want. So I'm just gonna, or convert it to the actual support. So I'll just roughly get that where that needs to be. So one thing that we noticed with this is, when you go to select the component here or the shape, when you do the convert button here for the supports, you'll notice that it wants you to select where it is on the pipe. And we found that if you're in a wireframe mode, it doesn't really pick up precisely where you're selecting. Like if I go in here and say I want to convert this, it asks me, okay, where do I want to put this on the pipe? And you'll notice it highlights on the edge of the pipe, but you really can't get it precisely where you need it to be. For example, with this, if I click on the side, it's going to put the insertion point over here, which is not really where I want it, and that's not going to show up properly on, for example, the ISO output. So what we would do is switch over to a shaded view. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and convert this and use the insertion point of the block as the point where I really want this to be located. So I'll just select insert here and then click on that. So at this point, it's converted. Since I use the insertion point, which is the very center of that support now, it's going to keep it lined up with the center of the pipe, and I can rotate this or modify it as needed. So just something to keep in mind as you're converting these like live in the model like this, that you'll want to make sure that you go to a shaded mode. And I need to, or we need to find out why that is. It may just be behavior of the software, but that was definitely the trick. There was to be in a shaded mode. All right, so moving on to creating custom parts still, but if you're going to create them as catalog parts, it's the same method you would use as creating other part types. Like if you're going to create a custom valve or instrument or anything like that, basically you would have the drawing that contains the geometry. You would run plant part convert and add a port to that support, and then you would save it in the drawing. And at that point, you can go into the default catalogs if you want to add it there, or create a new supports catalog and import that in and convert that into an actual catalog part. Now then, after you do that, you'd want to add that to your pipe support specs through Spec Editor, and then basically it's available to use in your pipe supports tool palette. So looking at that over here, for example, I've added this support onto the tool palette over here after I converted it, and I can kind of show with this one here. If I move this off the line and just take a look, let me get this a little bit further out here to focus on it. And if I explode this out just a couple times to get it back to just a block, and then get rid of that point there because we won't need that. Basically, this block reference I would do, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and convert this over, plant part convert, and you can see I've already created that. I've already gone through this process here with this one. It just needs one port, which would be at the very center of the support. And just kind of make sure that the one thing you want to look at here is that you rotate these and align them to the x-axis. I noticed that if I just leave it default there where it's just pointing the direction where I had it, it would come out 90 degrees and it would be flipped the wrong way. So if you're looking at this from the perspective of the WCS, make sure you've got it lined up on the x-axis and just use the insertion point right at the center. And then basically run the plant part convert. So at that point, now that I've converted this and I've saved it in this drawing, I could use this drawing to create a custom catalog part for this particular support here.
Now, you mentioned that the plant spec for supports, the pipe support spec there would be where you'd put these. We should mention that you can only have one of those per project, and it has to be named that.
Yeah,
but you
that's
can
true.
make sure that when you set up your project, you got the right catalog of or spec of supports there for you.
Yeah, so you can't have multiple pipe supports in there. The software is looking at that name of pipe support spec. That's why we've highlighted that here. So if you have anything else that's different in there, it really won't let you use those. And same thing for the tool palette. That's what it's looking for to build that pipe support spec tool palette off of. And if you need to, you can go back in here and let's say you've added a bunch of custom supports into your catalog and you've updated that spec, you could take this one out and get rid of this file and create a new one here through your spec viewer. So if I go into spec viewer and select, just drag this over so you can see it, and we'll go back to the pipe support spec and then just click any one of these and say create tool palette. That will rebuild a new palette with all of the parts that you've added, all the supports you've added to that spec sheet there. So that's one way to do it. Otherwise, if you just added one or two, you could go in here, for example, and just add the one and say add to tool palette, and it will drop it in here at the very bottom as a new shape there. It has a blank name because I failed to type in the description on those, but that's how you would add those to your basically your pipe support spec for everyone else in the project to use that. So yeah, just kind of a reference here, talking about the insertion point being in the center. That way you can keep the support aligned to the center of the pipe, the orientation so that it'll come out properly when you go to place that. Just basically keep that in mind as you're creating these here. And then one thing to mention for customization on Python scripting. So if you do get into Python scripting, one thing you can do here is you can add grips to your supports that you've created. So as part of the script, there's a set linear dimension that provides the actual grips that will show up. You can have more than one because obviously there are different adjustments for different types of supports, and you may have to have more than one in there. Now, I would say the Python scripting is pretty involved. We're not going to go into that in this session. It's pretty complex. We do have a lot of links at the end. We'll show those that take you to some write-ups and some articles on how you can get started on creating custom parts in general with Python. And then talking about the S keys for isometric drawings. So this is a table that I clipped out of the demystifying isometrics document. These are the shapes that you can use, or basically the 2D blocks that are used on the isometric to represent support. So if you just convert a support out of the box, or even use the out of the box ones, there are just generic shapes here that it'll use. So for example, support is just 2 lines there, but you may want to change this if you want to show a little bit different there. You can modify those by just typing this in on the property palette. Now that you could do that if you were just doing on one support you converted. If you want to do it for a group of parts or supports that you've created, then you would go into catalog editor and put this in there, or for example, a spec editor, and that way it would already have this in there each time you place the new support in there. And let's see, I do have one question. I just want to pause for a moment in the Q&A box. Will the supports converted to Plant 3D adapt to whatever pipe size is needed? So converted supports do not. They don't dynamically change like the parametric ones do out of the box. So you would, if you were going to create a collection or a catalog of parts, you would maybe want to take those and copy them across the drawing and get the different, scale them up across the size range you're using. And then you could do plant part convert on each one of those add the single port that's needed there, and then when you take those into catalog editor, you could import that group in and have basically build a part family of sizes needed for those supports. So just kind of looking at some of the best practices here. Looking at dynamic input. So this is something that you can turn on and works really well with pipe supports. It's an AutoCAD function. You turn on from the customization menu or enable it so that you can see it. And then down in the AutoCAD tray, you'll see that at the bottom, you can turn this on and off. And so what this kind of looks like is as you're positioning a pipe support on a pipe run, you can tab through to the different dimensions it's picking up based on the position to the next support, maybe the end of a pipe run, and you can type in precisely where you need that to be and then hit return. It'll actually, drop that in and attach it to the pipe at that location. So really helpful for anything, where you need to adjust something or move it. Even here, if I have it turned on and I want to move this existing support, you can see that this will change as I drag this up and down. If I want to do something precise, I could say maybe 10 inches there, and it would locate it for me. And that just helps to avoid going through and doing a bunch of measurements or snapping lines and things like that. So really useful for placing a new support or just moving supports around here in general. So even when you place a new one, you can see it's giving me some running dimensions there. And if I just type in whatever I want on whichever one I'm at, it'll put that in precisely.
Jason, we have a question in the
Okay.
Q&A. We're asking about what are the options to automatically generate pipe support detail drawings with the automatic labels, your bill of materials and dimensions preferable? I don't know that functionality in Plant 3D, so
yeah, I think that's something that has to be done sort of manually. There's no at least I haven't seen anything that will do that so far in there. We'll talk a little bit about some of the annotation options, for example, tagging and then annotating that on the ISO. But as far as a detail drawing, you'd have to be, a note in there and then have another drawing that goes with the ISOs.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving on to tip number 2. So this is supports on supports, and we'd mentioned that was up on the ribbon bar. So this is where if you had something like a dummy leg and a stanchion there, and you wanted to connect those up, you would just click on the ribbon bar for the support on supports command, and then you would select the first support and the second one. So that's going to link those up. And like I said, it'll be tied to that line. It'll get the line number assigned to it so that when you run an ISO, it'll display both of those and display it on the bill of material. And as far as tag numbers, this gets into if you need to assign a tag number to a pipe support, you can do that from within the project setup and enable that. So there is a support tag out of the box, but you may want to customize that maybe for the type and then a number, sequential number behind it, however you want to set that up. And then when you go into the model, you have that option when you say right click on a support and then assign tag, or click on the property palette, then you can actually assign a tag number there. And of course, the question comes up, can you show the annotation for that tag on the isometric drawings? And you can, but it does require some customization of manually modifying the ISO config XML. So we did some testing with this, and it requires going into for example, the default theme, which is going to be used for most of the drawings as far as the annotation. So if you go into that default and take for example, the existing tag component scheme and then copy that down, below it, you can modify this, and really all you need to change is where it says then give it a name. We called this one support tag, and then the filter it's using is support. So that's looking for any support objects in the drawing that is tagged, and then it'll show the annotation on the ISO sheet, and we'll see what that looks like here shortly. And then for orthos, it's pretty simple. You just right click and do an ortho annotate, go down to piping and then support annotation, and there's one for a tag number. And then when you do that and tag a pipe support on the ortho sheets, you'll get this here where you can actually place the tag numbers beside it. And this is an example on the right here of what it looks like on the isometric sheets where you've assigned the tag and then you've got the annotation turned on and enabled. It will put the support tag beside each one of the supports. And going into this is similar to movement for tip number 5. Basically, dynamic input is going to be helpful there. Sometimes if you just want to do a measurement, you could take an existing support, explode it, do a distance command, and then go ahead and undo the explode, because you'll get more snap points when you explode that out to an object. Just make sure you undo that, put it back to where it was. And then you can basically copy that distance that you need and then paste that into the dynamic input function here. So you can get precisely where you need to position a support. And then dragging to snap, for example, if you need to locate a support to a snappable object like a piece of steel, you could go into a perpendicular mode there, click the move part grip, and then you can drag, or not necessarily drag, but once you click it, then you're moving it, and then you can come over to a snap point and then place that precisely where you need it to go. So be sure to remember to use the grips there.
And one thing to note too also is that if it ever does become disconnected, you'll see the little water droplet that's up there, like you see at the end of that piece of pipe. The supports will show the same disconnect graphic there. So sometimes when you're moving supports, you'll accidentally move it off of the center line or disconnect it. All you got to do is just reattach the support, as long as you are still on the pipe or component. So
right, and you'll see that too when you do the before you do the support on support. So if you make a mistake in selecting with that, if you see that drip icon, then you know you've got to go back and maybe do that again until you get that drip symbol to go away, and then you know that those supports are connected together. And then yeah, same thing on the pipe runs there. Good point.
Yep, thanks, Jason.
And one thing that we've ran into a report from customers is supports that are resetting to default without really knowing what's happened there. And usually it's spec update so for example, if you set the length on a whole set of pipe hangers in your project and you drag that grip up and then you run a spec update, all of a sudden those have changed and they've gone back to default. So that's kind of I guess you could say it's working as expected, because spec update is supposed to go through and keep all your objects in the model up to date with the spec sheet. However, on something like a support where you've customized the length of the support, you really don't want it to do that. So there is a workaround to help avoid that. And it's over here in the spec sheet itself under the component designation. So you can see that here. So if you set this to be parametric as far as the component designation, that will keep the spec update from overriding those modifications you've done on the part dimensions for the support. So this was implemented starting with Plant 3D 2018 1.1 update, and all the future current releases do this as well. So it's something you can just modify and turn on basically to avoid those from happening.
The other option would be, like on the previous slide, just don't pick the update parts, but that's eventually somebody's going to miss that. So this is a way of ensuring that no matter what you pick in the model, supports won't resize and change the parameters when you update the specs.
Yeah, and there's a couple options here. The by default it's blank, which means that you can't really edit the geometry in the model. If, like, for example, if you do that on a valve, nobody can modify that, and obviously you don't want somebody modifying a spec part like that. But if it is blank, then it receives all spec updates, so it just kind of skips the component designation. If you were to use custom, this was for like custom parts, and it's intended that you can edit the geometry in the model, and basically it'll show you, the parametric shape there in the properties palette, and you can type in the size you want, but it won't be included in spec updates because that's not really a spec part. And then finally, the parametric one here we're talking about, you can edit the model just like you would a normal support, but then you can get the property updates, but it ignores the size parameter updates in there. So just kind of a safeguard to keep your supports from getting modified in the project that are already pre-existing and you run a spec update. And one tip here is, if you're good with SQLite, you want to just go through and edit these. In the spec files for Plant 3D are actual SQLite databases, so you could go in and run this SQL statement here, and it's just going to update everything in the table there to be component designation parametric under the engineering items. So either go through Spec Editor and you can basically change this at the top level. For example, if I go in here and modify something like this, and I go over to the component designation, I can say this is going to be parametric, and then you can just copy this and paste it down as you would in like Excel, and then save that. So that would set it on that particular one. And you'd have to go through each one of these, and that's kind of what it's talking about in the SQLite. And then the other option would be to export this out to Excel, modify that column, and then import it back in, and you could get all of these set up, or whichever ones you need to modify.
It is case sensitive too, right?
That's true. Yes, it is. There's a blog post here that gives some details around this. That's where this screen capture came from. When this first came out, there was a blog post around that. So we put the link in there if you want to go check out that in a little bit more detail. And the other tip here we wanted to mention was it's more of a known issue. So basically when you're adding pipe supports on a slope pipe, especially when you get up to more than several degrees, you'll start to see this with the certain supports you don't want to align graphically with the pipe. It doesn't rotate those over. So you will see that that is a known issue, and it's been reported to the product team to see if they can adjust those to align a little bit better with the pipe as these are placed. It's not really too big of an issue on certain things like a support hanger like that, but the other ones it definitely shows up, and it's a graphical thing. I mean, it will still use the same point there for the ISOs, but it's just in the model it's not going to look right. And so really no workaround for that at the moment. And then we also want to link over to the resources around Python scripting, because there's been AU classes in the past. There's been for example, the AutoCAD Dev blog has a 3-part series here on creating Python scripts for Planet 3D. And in general, these are just references that we wanted to include if you want to get into something like that. And the other thing at the very bottom here, we've got links to, there's on the Autodesk App Store, there is a Python pipe support pack that you can purchase, which will give you some additional supports that are in there. If you want to check that out, I can bring that up here very quickly. Let me go ahead and close this and then bring up the link.
Jason, I also created a poll to help us plan the November one. So when you get to a point where you can go ahead and throw that poll up, we'll do that. But go ahead and share your screen and this stuff.
Okay, yeah, so this one here is one that I noticed out on the App Store. So this will provide you with some additional shapes here with this content pack. Well, I call it content pack. It's actually independently created here, but this is through Python scripting. So he's created some shapes here that you can purchase and then load that into a catalog, and it'll give you these additional parametric components that are Python driven. The other one here is from Autodesk Reseller. This is a steel supports pack for Planet 3D. And this is basically another one that you can purchase, a catalog of supports, and you'll get these shapes that are listed out here as some additional ones to use that are really not available out of the box. So just some more specialized shapes that maybe you need in your project there. So those are available. Let me just go back down here to the resources. And I guess we could go ahead and bring up the poll. Just pause for a moment.
Let me try to launch this. This is my first GoToWebinar poll, so hopefully you see this the question, and we'd like you all to select one. Basically, we're trying to decide whether we want to make the November Planet 3D Community Virtual Meetup part of Autodesk University, which is still online and free, but you'd have to register for Autodesk University and access the content there. Or if you want it to be just like it is this month and next month, where you register separate. So if you give us a little bit of feedback, that helps us plan for November. So looks like we're getting some good response there. So but half of you have voted so far. So please click on that, and we'll take that on advisory when we plan with our team what we're going to do in November. Okay, looks like still a few of you voting. Okay. I'm going to close that poll because everybody seems to have stopped voting. and I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jason.
for bringing that up, Joel, and for everyone for the feedback. So those are all the content that we had for this month on the pipe supports. We're going to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions around the topic today, pipe supports, or anything else really, we'd be glad to go over those with you and see if we can provide an answer. If we don't have the answer, then we'll take those down and get the answer for you, and then share it after the session, and then cover that in the next meetup. I'm sorry, next month's meetup. And if you'd like to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand in here. We'll unmute you and you can ask live. You can type your question down in the Q&A box as well. All right, let's see here. Any other questions? Link to the App Store. Yeah, so I can actually put those into the chat window here real quick. Grab those. Just copy that link. So this one is this would be the App Store Python support, and then we've got this one here from Applied Software, which is going to be the Steel Supports catalog that they sell. Let's see, don't see anybody with their hand raised. Just give another minute or so and see if anybody has a question that comes up.
Yeah, we appreciate your participation and asking the questions. And this session is part of a series that we put together every year. So if you have any ideas for topics that you'd like us to cover in these sessions, feel free to put those in the questions, the Q&A as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
For next year.
Yeah, we're getting ready to start planning for next year, and anything that is of interest, we'll put that on the list. I have a question here about the Python. Okay, so the Python script like to replace the variable numeric value with an alpha character to more work closely with client standard support naming. Let's see, only numeric values are set to the spec editor field and not alpha characters.
It could be if it's for a parameter. I think that what you're looking at is it's a dimensional parameter and you want it to refer to like a standard drawing where it's looking at value A or something like that. But I think that in the specs, yeah, if it's related to the Python script and it's a dimensional value, if and statements. Yeah, it's kind of an advanced one. I have not done that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Python expert. We do have somebody in our other group that I can propose that to and see if he's got the answer. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure that's possible. We'll find out and check into that for you. I got another question here coming through. I'm having trouble creating some custom valve catalogs. You show how to create a custom pipe support into a catalog in Spec. Yeah, so basically the same thing for a pipe support as it would be for a valve. Let me go back in here to Plant 3D.
I think you kind of created that plant part convert, right?
Yeah, so
you've done that step.
So this particular drawing, I converted it. I've added the ports in there. And over here in Catalog Editor, I can kind of show how this comes into a catalog. So in order to create this right here, I'm just in the regular supports catalog, basically added a size range here. Let me just remove this one and I'll put a new one in here. So I'll just redo this again. So there's only one port, so it's just going to be the one port nominal diameter and matching pipe OD. Now, if I go to select model, it's going to ask me, where do you have this saved? And I've copied this over to the supports catalog, so I'll just click this one drawing. And there's only one block in here. And when I click open, it sees it. I converted that in there. It says, okay, this block has one port. Click that one, and then it's going to bring this in. Then when I save it to the catalog, that's going to write it into the catalog itself. And then you'll notice here it created this block name. So that's telling me that it's converted properly. All I really need to do is put in the component sizes and then any details over here as far as like the long description family, assign the S key, and then I can add that to my spec sheet. So it would be the same process for a valve. If there's an issue with, for example, as you're going in here and setting up the size and this is not converting, then it might be something with the drawing file location, or it's not picking up the supports properly. It could be any number of things, but if you wanted to maybe submit a support case and we could have one of our specialists look at that with you and kind of see maybe what's going on with that process if it's hanging up somewhere.
I think there's at least a couple AU classes on creating block-based catalogs and specs that I've seen on Autodesk University online.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
you could always check that out because they kind of go through all the steps and some best practices. Like when you saw him go to his test drawing, he put that in the same location as his catalog content, so it's manageable. You don't have to remember it's in a different location, and naming the blocks that you use plant part convert on to be related to the sizes, because you're going to have to create a different block for every size in that drawing. So, you know, hanger O1, hanger O2, hanger O3 may be useful, but if they don't match the sizes, then it'd be hard to create the catalog. So there's best practices there.
Yeah, this is one I just wanted to pull up real quick. I'll put this in the chat window. So this class goes through the whole process. There's a 30-minute video there. I believe it's got, yeah, the handouts here in the download. So this will take you through the whole process if you want to take a look at that and just kind of see what it all entails there. Just kind of going step by step. But this is a really good one that shows you how to do the multiple sizes. And this would be the same for like pipe supports if you're going to create a family of those supports in there, doing the plant part convert, and then coming over to the catalog to get those set up. It also explains how you have to kind of line up the ports there as well, just a little bit more in depth than what we covered today. But once you convert it, you'll see that drawing file. It'll create an XML file out there with it, and I believe I've got one out there. I can bring this over and kind of show you. So that was under the CPEC common, and then the supports catalog. So you've got, in here you've got basically, there's my drawing file, there's the XML that tells it the port data, and then I've got a thumbnail image that it pops up that it automatically creates to go into what's going to show in Catalog Editor. But that's all covered in here. So I recommend you take a look at that, and may help you get that situated there.
Good. I don't see any other questions there right now, so.
Yep. So if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and close out today. Just give a few moments here to see if there's anything else that anyone has. Let me go ahead and bring this back up. The closing slide. So yeah, we appreciate everyone joining today and look forward to meeting with you next month and your feedback there on what we should do for the next session. And yeah, so we'll be looking forward to talking to you next time. And
this will be posted. This will be posted on our Autodesk Customer Success Hub, this video, as well as the questions that we have online. We'll be answering those and posting those up there too. So thanks again. And Jason, thanks for a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you all. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.